So as you know, I'm not an economist when it comes to it. I'm more, to say, your humble commentator in the world of the bizarre world of British politics. And that's what we like to talk about. We like to talk about the politics. We like to talk about the policy that can very often go on in Westminster. But sometimes you get things like this in the current Conservative leadership race, where we have seen an arms race in how much tax can I promise to cut. And remember, very much at this moment, this race is all about and aimed at saying the right things to, well, the Conservative MPs, because they're the ones who currently have the vote. They're the ones who decide who go to the final two. So you will probably see a drastic change in what certainly Rishi Sunak, because we know he's going to be in the final two. And I'm still thinking it's going to be a Liz and Rishi final two. I will be very, very surprised if Mordaunt can retain her second place, because I think as soon as Badenoch goes out, well, well, today or yesterday, as it would be, I think it will then come down to the final three, which I'm probably expecting should be today, unless anything drastic has happened, will be Sunak, Mordaunt, and Truss. And I'm very, very confident that once Badenoch drops out, those votes are going to go to Liz Truss. She is the only then sort of right-wing candidate, and trust me, Mordaunt has not been wowing her fellow MPs in these two recent debates. So there is, and she's also not done very well under the pressure that she's been put under in recent times. Not only that, a lot of her supporters are probably very worried about the fact that basically all summer, Rishi Sunak's probably going to knock 7 bells out of her on the performance of the economy, as he has done, at least twice in these last two debates. And that is where she will perform very, very poorly. So, today we're going to go over to the East Anglia bylines, because there's a really good article written by, let me get his name, Professor Richard Murphy. He's an economics professor, and he's talking about, again, what this actually means when they're talking about tax cuts, because we've said it before on this channel. When a Tory talks about tax cuts, and when these Tory leadership hopefuls talk about tax cuts, that means only one of two things. Either A, they're going to borrow more money, but where are they going to borrow this money from? And also, if they do cut taxes, that means the government will be providing a less of a service somewhere. So what service are they going to cut? I've already warned you that we are probably going to be walking very, very soon, if not already, into an education crisis caused by the Tory government and their very, very excessive tax cuts. And education has very much been on the front line of these tax cuts. So let's go into this article, because I think it's really, really well done. But yeah, definitely go sort of check it out afterwards. And yeah, so yeah, let's get on with this then. So, sorry, still a bit warm. Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, let's get on with this then. So please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and an donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel that way. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button, as well as the YouTube subscription button, where you get all sorts of little bells, whistles, and emojis and whatnot when you subscribe to the channel. So over we go to the article today. So, as we said, this comes from the East Anglia bylines, with the title of "The Government is not an economic black hole, as the Tories seem to think. It's essential to our national well-being." There is a real problem amongst these hopeful Tory party leaders. Not one of them seems to understand the role that the government has in our national economy. It is not the black hole they seem to think it is. It's essential to our national well-being. I try to avoid the maths when explaining economics, because even the most basic formula seems to make people recoil in shock. But I'm going to have to explain one formula that makes sense of my arguments in this thread. But it only involves addition, so it's not hard. The formula is this: y equals c plus g plus I plus x minus m. So Y is national income, or gross domestic product, or GDP as it's called. C is what we consume. Government is consumption to provide goods and services. I is investment in the economy. X is exports. X is exports, and M is imports. So what the formula says is that our national income is made up of what we consume via the private sector, plus what we consume that the government provides for us, plus what we invest, plus what net exports, which means all X less M means. And that's it. It's not really that hard. In that case, let's be clear. What the government does is supplying us with services that we all need. It all adds to our income, whether it's education, health, social care, criminal justice, and so much else, including defense. The government is not a black hole into which we pour our money. Instead, and this should be no shock to anyone, although it seems to be to Tory MPs, that the government does useful things and that adds to considerable value to our lives. That is why people are so angry that these services are now being supplied so badly because they are underfunded. The fact is that we cannot do without the state supplies to us collectively. But if the Tory leadership candidates are to be believed, we need less of these things, and the government does for us. They make that clear by demanding that we cut levels of government spending. But if they succeed in making those cuts, the first thing they will do is reduce our national income. That is inevitable. G is the part of that equation for the national income. If the government cuts its spending, then G goes down. And in that case, the income Y goes down too. And let's be absolutely clear what that means. They will be sacking people in the public sector. 20% is cuts is the target. So fewer tax inspectors because we don't need them, fewer people to help the disabled, those on low income and in need, fewer teachers, nurses, and carers too, and many fewer people checking the health and safety. And as for climate change, who needs to worry about that? These people need to go, apparently. We don't want them. They do us no good, so the potential Tory leaders say. But I have news for those Tory leadership candidates. Getting rid of these public servants, and not only do we lose what they add to the economy, but we also lose what they spend as well. They won't be spending as much when they're on unemployment, nor will most people find jobs as well paid. That's not because these people are overpaid now, but because they were trained to do their current jobs. They're not trained as lorry drivers, sales managers, accountants, or whatever other skills are supposedly short of. So whatever work they take will be lower paid in most cases. Add these factors together, and cutting the government spending poses a much bigger threat to the national income than simply having to find old new work for these people being made redundant by doing so, which means that this exercise is all about what it comes down to. So the first thing that any politician proposing to cut government spending has to suggest is what other component the income will go up by quite a lot because the government has cut its spending. The argument of the Tory politician that will make this happen, and they have three reasons. First, they say that we prefer choice to provision of services by the government, so we spend more wisely than the government does. And that they say that the better direction of spending by us, that the results that creates a boost in real incomes. They don't explain how. Secondly, they mainly seem to think that investment goes up if people have more to spend because that encourages companies to invest more. Except they don't think that because they also think that companies need tax subsidies to invest, and they wouldn't if they believed that companies would do this anyway. And they keep demanding more and more of these subsidies, which have reached an epic scale under Sunak. No more investment has resulted, by the way. So I think we can safely to say that the Tories believe that their market-based arguments on the investment and their tax-based ones have failed. And we went over that yesterday about how the article from Open Democracy about how the when you look at the Tories' record on the economy, they have very much failed on that. So anyway, it continues. So what is their third reason? This is the one that is the most perverse, and this is the one we should now pay for what the government used to supply us with. Students now pay for education, for example, and we pay for private medicine because the NHS is overwhelmed. You get the gist. Now, this, of course, does not mean that we're better off because we now have to pay ourselves for what the state previously supplied, cutting government spending, G, in the hope that we'll buy the same things privately as part of our private consumption, C, is a very bizarre policy. Healthcare is the obvious way to explain this. Most healthcare outcomes in the USA are worse than in the UK unless you're wealthy. If you're older or low paid or just downright poor, let alone have a chronic disability of any sort, they're worse. So it is a fact that the US healthcare costs twice as much as the UK healthcare. £1 in every 12 in the UK is spent on healthcare. In the US, it is $1 in every 6. Why? Because most US healthcare is provided by the private sector with a profit motive built in. So, why does the US pay twice as much as we do for worse healthcare outcomes? First, because they have to fund profits. The second is because they have to pay for the massive admin costs of the private insurance based healthcare system. Together, that doubles the price. And as for the record, Tory reforms are also increasing prices right here in the UK. A single NHS would be much cheaper to run than the fractured service that we have, supplied through hundreds of trusts. That's the same in education too, where academy trusts duplicate costs enormously by absorbing into the admin expenses the money should be going to frontline teaching. The care system is much the same way. So what the Tories want to do is cut government spending more to make us accept more worse services, or pay for the services that we used to have because the private sector now needs to take a big cut out of them. And in the case of cutting government spending might appear to force private consumption up because people will have no choice but to pay for what the state previously supplied. But actually, people will be worse off. They get a worse service and pay far more. So who is the winner? It's the private sector, of course. But let's be clear. Those gaining there are the bosses and owners. The evidence of those forced to take private sector jobs who previously worked on similar activities of state salary will inevitably end up worse off. And here's another problem. Paying more to people who already have high incomes and wealth does not increase national income. That's because they save it. They don't consume. They might speculate on property on shares, but neither of them forms part of the national income. And savings do not fund investment either. It is funded by borrowing these days, and savings do not fund bank lending either. Because every bank loan involves the creation of new money, no depositor's money is ever involved. So pushing income upwards from those who need it and those who would spend it to those who don't and won't spend it does not increase national income. It actually reduces it while increasing wealth inequality. And remember that almost every program of government cuts and all the associated tax cuts programs have a singular goal in cutting the real level of government provided services to force us to buy for ourselves what the state wants supplied. There is no other plan implicit in what the Tories are proposing. This is the only way they can think of to increase private sector consumption and cutting government spending. It leaves us worse off. So, when the Tory leadership hopefuls say that they want to cut government spending, let's be clear. They are talking about cutting growth, and they are talking about cutting the incomes of working people, and they are talking about increasing inequality. That is why that is one thing that is guaranteed, and that is the public sectors will be worse off. And that is bad for us all. Why? Because those services are what are called public goods, and they are services that are supplied for our common good. The Tories might disagree, but the prosperity of this nation is built on strong education, health, and a functioning legal system, and the provision of a safe safety net that helps people take risks, and a functioning tax system that ensures all will be treated fairly. These things are all public goods, which is precisely why the state has supplied them throughout the lifetimes of almost everyone now alive. Remove any of these, and the rest will totter. That is what the Tories want, and the resulting chaos is, they think, good for them. But it destroys the public good, and the public good contributes more to national income than any market alternative can. In that case, the Tory leadership hopefuls are not only suggesting something that is economically dire, but they are seeking to undermine the well-being of all of us. Unless we will be part of that very exploitative rich, which all of their friends are, and this dire scenario, which none of the Tory leadership hopefuls is a person fit to run the economy. So please don't let them tell you stories about how bad the government is. Not one of them is telling the truth. And he's right on the money. We've been saying this for quite some time. You need good government services. People want good government services. And we've seen, as explained there, we've seen the NHS rather than one NHS. We've now seen these split up into individual umbrella organizations. And bear in mind, education has been split up into these academy trusts far longer than the NHS has. And if you want to paint a picture of where the NHS is going, you've only got to look at just how bad education is going, and the fact that I've been warning just very recently that we are sleepwalking into a situation where we are going into an education crisis because we do not have enough new teachers coming in to fill the roles that old teachers are leaving, and we can't retain new teachers for long enough to be able to fill these roles, as well as a myriad of other problems in education. It just points to you the exact reason why education is failing at the moment, because they've been split up into these individual academy trusts. And as they said there, all the money that the government would normally go into frontline teaching is instead going into admin costs, something which apparently we are told is really bad. Again, it's the mystifying element of Tory policy. But there you go. I hope you've sort of really enjoyed that, because I think it does a really good job of explaining just really what these tax cuts, of what these Tory leadership hopefuls are sort of proposing, and unfortunately what we're in for, certainly for the next 2 years, because not a single one of these, unless shall we say enough trouble is caused, or enough dissatisfaction is spread amongst these Tories MPs, and they just decide, screw it, we're just going to go for a general election. They are going to keep themselves in power certainly for the next 2 years, because they want to try and sort of rebuild sort of the reputation of the Tory party. And they've got a very uphill battle to try and prove that, especially as we've said before, in November, when the cost of living crisis is going to explode, along with another series of crises that are all going to join together, and it's just going to so yeah, look forward to that, or not really in any case. But yeah, as always, pardon me, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-up donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.